Today I'm going to do a review on the water softener that I put in here. This is a 64,000 grain tank, resin tank here. And this isn't so much installation, although you'll obviously see how I installed it. Just more of a review of the system and how I set mine up. So I'll start over here. And this is where I come in from the well. Then I have a shutoff down here. So if I need to, I can shut off all of the water going to the house, but still leave the well pump on. If I need to, I put a hose bib here just to drain the line, although that's not completely necessary with the next step here. So this is 1-inch PVC. Then we convert to 1-inch PEX just because I like working with PEX a lot better. I had this section PVC and I keep changing how things are set up, and it's just annoying to continually redo it. So I'll give you an example here in a second. This is a 100 micron reusable filter that is for sediment, and so it has this blow off valve here that you can just turn the knob and it will remove any of the sediment that's built up here. This is the same thing, but in a 50 micron. So for example, this isn't really doing much right now, so it's possible that I will remove this and sell this or reuse it on another property, at which point I can just cut these two areas and put in one long PEX pipe extremely easily without any glue. Just crimp them on, in 2 minutes I know I have something good. So I like these things. I would definitely get the 50 micron again. I'm not so sure I would get the 100 again because I don't really seem to need to blow it off, either of them, frequently. And when I do, there's very little sediment. Now, I've only had this set up for about a month and a half now, but some of the people online were having to blow these off several times a day. So if that's the case, then you definitely want to step it down using a higher micron first. And I think they have up to like 200. So you might want to get a 200 and work your way down if you are continually blowing it off. But I would go ahead and just get the 50 and then try it first and see how that goes. I kind of wanted to jump in and get it all finished all in one shot, so I got both, but I don't think I needed that other one. So then I come up here and tee off. This is going to be my hose loop. So because I'm adding a softener that is salt-based, you're not supposed to water your plants with that. I don't think it's as much of an issue. I could be wrong for sure, so I'm no expert, but I think this was an issue, more of an issue before, when more salt water would come out. But as it is, the way the softener works, and I'll explain that in a second, but it's not really injecting salt into the water that much. There might be some salt residue left over going out, but I can't imagine, especially after a couple days worth of use, that you're going to have much salt escaping the system. But so the idea here is you have your own hose loop, which I have 3 hose bibs at the moment. So this will go up, and that way is the first one. And then of course I'll turn it on. That way we can feel free to water our grass and not potentially kill any vegetation with water that has a higher salt content. Of course, at the moment you can see it's shut off. That's why it's going across the pipe. If you don't know, going with the pipe means that it's turned on. So then we come up here and I have a pressure gauge. Right now this is reading about 60. Of course, I'm on a well here, so it fluctuates. The expansion tank you see is not in here. That is out at the well pump in the well house, but it actually kind of looks like it just went on now. Now we're climbing up to around 68, 70 PSI. So this will change, but this is good to see pre-filtered what the pressure is reading. Yeah, now we're at 72, something like that. So as I understand it, between 60 and 80 is sort of the normal pressure that your house should be running at. And that's all preference. If you have a lower pressure, you are putting less stress on your spigots and appliances. However, this house is a little bit wider, and so to get to the other side of the house, it actually loses at least 10 psi. Yeah, now we're the whole way up close to 90. So I've had to crank the pressure up a little bit. The only place you really noticed it was in showers. There was a little bit less pressure, but I added a dog grooming chop on the other side of the house, and the deshed nozzle requires 60 psi. So to get that, the minimum requirement, I had to jack this up. In the process, I did have to replace a shutoff on a toilet and a cartridge in a shower that had gone bad. Now those were 20 years old anyway, so it's not, you can't, I wouldn't expect turning the pressure up would immediately kill all of your things. But if you do have some older appliances that are weaker, you're gonna have to replace them on a more frequent basis. So anyway, then coming up here, this is shut off, so that way no unfiltered water can get to the rest of the house. And here we have it coming on. Again, this drain is nice. I don't know that this other one was needed over here, but this one is nice because I can shut this shut off here and shut this shut off here, and then the whole filter and softener loop is disabled, and then I can come here and drain this line. So this is a 4.5 by 10 pleated filter. Now, my research says the pleated filters are the best because they have the most surface area. So it's the best of both worlds, where you get a high throughput of water, but also so your gallon per minute is higher, but it also catches a lot of the sediment. The blown filters catch a lot of the sediment, but they have a lower flow rate. And the old wound ones have a high flow rate, but they don't catch as much sediment. The biggest reason I went with this one is because it's clear. It drives me nuts that you can't see through a lot of these housings. I think they should all be clear. How do you know when to replace your filter? I'm not one that would just replace the filter just because it's been 60 days. It all depends on how dirty your water is, how much water you're using, based on the life of these. So in my opinion, it's foolish to get one that's not transparent and then just replace them randomly. Okay, so from there we come up to the in. Now, normally people would have their water filter pointed, or their softener pointed this way, but just with the way my plumbing was, I thought I'll just turn it on its side. It'll stick away from the wall less, and that's the way the plumbing is flowing anyway. So this is the Auquasure 64,000 grain water softener. It does use salt, which I'll show you the salt tank in a bit. But basically, it just takes in all of your water, it removes all of the hardness, and then on a predetermined cycle, it will remove the hardness that is built up in the tank. It'll flush that out during the regeneration cycle, and then it will then you'll be good for another month or two or whatever. That all depends, again, on how much you use, how hard your water is to begin with, and what you set your regeneration cycle to be. Currently, I have it set up to 4,000, and you can see I'm down to, I've used about 300 gallons of water. So after another 3,700 gallons, that's what gallons says here, then it will regenerate again. So over here, this is the drain line. I don't know if you can see that coming out. No, I'm sorry. This is the brine line running over to the brine tank that's over there. And then this is the drain line coming up. One problem people are concerned about is having the brine line go above your head. I can say I've had no issues with this. What I did here was extend this pipe so that it was long enough for me to use the hose that they gave that came with it. But yeah, I put an air gap loop here, but otherwise I've had no issue with it trying to pump it up. It's only, I don't know, a 3-foot span up and then sideways from there. So it has had zero issues doing that. As far as the brine, you can see it comes over here, and I coupled it I have a reverse osmosis, RO, hose kit that came with these couplers and the extra hose. I needed probably about 2 feet minimum more. I added 3 or 4 feet so that I had plenty of slack. But I've had no issues drawing the brine water up. So here's my brine tank. You can see right now it's a little over half, probably 3/4 full of water. And there's, let me kick it. Okay, sometimes the salt will sink down. So right now there's, I don't know, a third or a quarter of salt in the bottom. So to start this off, I only put 2 bags in, and then I will let it go till the salt is completely gone or very, very close to being completely gone. That helps prevent salt bridges from forming. A salt bridge is where it looks like you have salt, but it just is never going down. And what happens is there's like a hard layer built up. You have to break it with a stick or hot water or something. Okay, so how does the softener work? Basically, there's resin beads inside of the softener. The water comes in. The resin beads are such that the hardness is attracted to the beads. So it just goes through kind of like any other filter where it goes down through and then comes back up. But by the time it comes back up, there's no more hardness particles in the water. The resin beads have caught them all. And so after regeneration, you'll see your water will be coming completely soft when you test it with a testing strip. And then after so much time, your resin beads will become saturated with hardness, and it's up to you to figure out what that number is. But once it's basically will be soft, 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 and then will be hard. It's not a gradual transition. It's a very abrupt transition. And so once you figure out what your number is, then you can subtract 100 or 2 gallons just for good measure. And that can be what your regeneration cycle is set for. Okay, so after your beads become fully saturated, then what it will do is it does a rinse feature where it runs a bunch of water through and dumps it all. And mine is coming over here to a sump pump that goes out to my drainage field. But then it will suck in the brine and rinse it through the resin. When the brine, the salt water, comes through, it will refresh the resin, and so all the particles of hardness will drop off of the resin and be flushed out of the system. And then after that, it will do a rinse to get any of the salt water out of the resin tank. And then after that, it will backfill to put water in the brine tank to go ahead and start dissolving salt, so that way it's ready for next cycle. So that's why I'm saying I don't know that there's going to be that much salt water or salt left in the system, because it does a rinse afterwards to get all of that salt and hardened minerals out of the system. Obviously, there's going to be some salt there, but I think the content is rather low. So let me come up here. I left space here so that I could add a post filter if I didn't like the taste coming out of the softener. Then I was going to add a carbon filter here that, I don't know if I said this is 5 micron. So the one up here would be a 5 micron carbon block, and that would alter the taste more significantly, hopefully for the better, to make it at least more neutral, and remove some even more particles to make it finer. And then if I needed to, I could put a UV filter up here. So that brings me to my next thing. The softener, one thing we were worried about with well water is that it would change the taste significantly. And I will say it's changed it, but only a very, very minor. And it's not really for the worse. It would basically be unnoticeable if you were to say, go on vacation, I install this, and then you come back. You wouldn't really be able to tell. You would be able to tell if you had 2 glasses side by side which one was the filtered one, but it's a very minor difference, so it's definitely nothing I would be worried about. As for the UV filter, before we did any of this, We got the water tested for any bacteria or stuff like that, and that came up clean. So then I got test strips for hardness on Amazon, and tested for hardness, as well as using the website from Auquasure. And then I have my brother-in-law is a plumber and was able to test it using a more professional test. So he was able to tell me exactly how hard it was. So anyway, so I have different methods, all confirming that I have hardness and around about same levels, although they were all slightly different. So now it's important to say that all of this stuff will be linked in the description. So the test strips, the tanks, the filters, these little filters down here, the housing, everything I'll have in the description, so you can pick and choose whatever you like. So let me see if I covered everything. So what were my issues? I guess I should have started the video with that. What were my issues for wanting the softener to begin with? If you boiled water, just straight cold water, it would look like starch water, where it had like a thick layer and it was very white and bubbly, and it would form like a crust around the top of the pan. We had dry skin and hair. The shower heads and spigots were crusty. Of course, sometimes that stuff would break off, so then it would get caught in the filters that you would have to take off and dump all that stuff out. And the kettle would have it's an electric element kettle, so that had a coating of mineral buildup. And I will say, since installing this, not only has that stopped, but it's started to reverse it. Again, I'm only about a month and a half in, but the kettle is already about halfway clean. So most of those minerals are slowly coming back into my tea and coffee as I make them, and then eventually it'll just be gone. So I already said this is a 64,000 grain tank. This is probably much bigger than what most people will need. It's even a bit oversized for this house, but everybody seems pretty insistent that you get the bigger than what you will need kind of thing. So you take the number of people in your house or the number of bathrooms you have, and how hard your water currently is. Those types of metrics, put that all into a calculator page, again, link in the description. And that will tell you how big of a tank you need to get. This is either the biggest or close to the biggest on Amazon. They do have a couple bigger ones on their website, but this already is only regenerating once every over a month, and it's based on the amount you use. So the old ones used to regenerate on a cycle, and so I think that was why people were going through a lot of salt and why it was slimy water. We don't have slimy water for this. It's basically exactly like it was. It's very hard to notice a difference, other than small differences. Like, again, I'm not dry. I don't have dry skin, but it's not some dramatic difference that I'm like, oh wow, this is completely new water. It has 1-inch lines. A lot of houses have 3/4 inch lines for their main supplies. So you would just reduce that before you come in here. You can get that all in one piece here, or add a reducer here. So, it would be increasing the line from 3/4 to 1 inch. So definitely nothing to worry about if you have different size lines. I already said 60-80 PSI is the recommended. I have this cranked up, and I think all of these pieces have like 100 or 120 PSI limit. So I'm well within what the acceptable range is for those. I'm just reading through my list. We use about 150 gallons a day. Obviously, it depends whether it's a weekend, whether everybody's home, or whether, if sometimes my wife is home, she's only part-time. So if she's home, and it's me and her, or whether it's just me, that varies greatly. But on average, it's about 150 gallons a day. I don't know. I didn't know what that figure was before we installed this. The one point here is this little wire coming down in here is what monitors how many gallons you use. So when I first installed this, this little pin was not in. And so when I was coming to the front, watching it after, this is not exactly real time, but it's pretty real time. So this number was not going down and not going down. So I knew something was off. So then I saw this cable dangling here, and you can only put that cable in one way. So, so yeah, once I plugged that in, then it started working. I already said it tastes fine. It's not slimy. The soap lathers marginally more, but I wouldn't even say that's dramatic. I think people make a much bigger deal about it than what it actually is. Same thing with our laundry. It's marginally softer, but again, it's nothing like, it's not worlds apart than what it was. So that would kind of make you question, like, is it even worth doing it? I would still say yes, just because I was dry before and that was annoying. And I boil water a lot. And that was kind of just freaking me out how bad it was. And I also bought all new appliances and fixtures for this house, and I want to preserve those as best I can. Now, putting the pressure up is a negative, but keeping it clean is a positive. So, oh, one more thing. When I first installed this, this brine line was not seeded the whole way. So when it did the regeneration and the backfill to fill the brine tank back up, I was getting some leaking here. So you can just unscrew this. Make sure it's screwed in tight. We put some Teflon tape on this threaded piece to make sure that it was tight. And then we took this out, which was extremely hard, but we took it out, cut the end off flat, because once it's been used, you can't reuse the ends. Then I put some of the lubricant on and pushed it in tight. So once we did that, that did work. If I didn't make this abundantly clear, I'm continuing to increase my numbers on the regeneration cycle. So I think probably the best way would be to regenerate the first time after your installation to make sure your system is clean and ready to go. But then keep a log of how many gallons you're using and retesting it with the hardness test strips. And then keep resetting the regeneration cycle manually. So if I come over here and I hold these first two buttons, I can go through and set there I'm setting the time. Here I'm setting the regeneration type, but here I'm resetting the 4,000 gallons. So if I hit that and then hit okay, and I think if I go the whole way through this, that'll be saved now, and it'll say 4,000. Yeah. So now it reset it to 4,000. Okay. So that will be able to tell me, if I continue to reset it and log how many gallons are used and keep testing it, it'll tell me exactly how many gallons can go through before I need to refresh it. And again, then subtract a little bit from that just to make sure that it stays fresh. Because the way this works is the time meter delay, this will get down to 0, and then the next day at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever you have it set for, is when it will regenerate. So this will go negative, essentially. It will go down to 0, and then the next time it triggers the time you have set is when it recycles. So there might be a couple hundred gallons there that gets through. So that's why you want to offset that and subtract a bit. But if you really want to push it, that's, I think, the best way to go. And I talked to their support, and they say you don't want to leave your resin stay saturated for an extended period of time. And I said, well, what about all of those people that forget to add salt, or they have a salt bridge, and so it'll go months without regenerating properly? You know, are their systems completely ruined? And the answer is no. So as long as you fix the setup, get the salt back in there, do a proper rinse, your system will be fine. Anything more than that, I think people are just being dramatic. If you really had to, you could replace the resin, but at that point, you know, the recommendation is just buy a new tank. But again, I'm no expert, but I think realistically, if you keep pushing this to the extreme, you can save a lot on salt and of course regenerating, which means less work for the head and stuff like that. So less times it's getting used. And it just generally less waste. So yeah, so that's what I intend to do. Right now I started out at 3,800. Right now I'm at 4,000. And I'll keep driving that up until I get to a point where it starts spitting out hard water, and then I'll back it off a little bit. Okay, next question is, can I mix on this unit, mix the unsoftened water with the soft water? Originally, I was looking at some units that could do that. That was pretty attractive to me, in case it was slimy, to adjust that so that way less softened water was coming out of the softener. This unit is not capable of doing that, and I asked support about slightly reducing, what was it? I think slightly turning this on and off, and then putting sort of a T here and jumpering it over there with maybe a ball valve or something like that. And they said you definitely wouldn't want to do that here, and even if you put a ball shut off here, those aren't meant to be cracked. They're meant to be either fully open or fully closed. So while that would work, you might need to replace that joint more frequently, or something like that, but they don't sell the parts or recommend you do that. It turns out that this isn't slimy, so I didn't need to worry about it. But if you are specifically looking for a mixer so that you can mix some of the pre-softened water with the soft water, this unit does not have that. Other units I've seen, the more specifically, I think it was a GE one, that was a cabinet type one, that had that ability. But here, if you wanted to do it, you would have to do it on your own. And again, in my case, I didn't end up needing it. But if you are considering that or certain that you'll need that, that's something that you need to think about here. The last thing I think was about cost and whether you should actually do this yourself. So like I said, the installation was extremely simple, especially if you're using PEX. I have another video on PEX on the channel, and now that I have a GoPro, I can do a more detailed visual installation of PEX. And I put the system in before I got the GoPro. That's why, if you're wondering why I'm not showing you installing it, that's why. But the installation process, seriously, was just screwing on these two parts on your system. And yeah, you have to cut this, but imagine this was one pipe. You cut it there, put these little 90s on, and that's it. You have to plug it into a regular outlet, so you might need to run an extension cord depending on where the closest outlet is, and then a drain line. A lot of houses have this drain line built in. Mine did not, but someday I might add a proper drain there for a softener. But I definitely recommend you do it yourself. So this was like whatever, $600, $700 for the unit, and then that was like $80, and then those little spin down ones were $30 or $40 a piece. They weren't more than $50. So all said and done, I spent about $1,000 doing this myself, and it wasn't hard to do. Now, again, I got the price from my brother-in-law just for a similarly sized unit, 64,000, and his price was around $1,200 for their cost. That wasn't even after they mark it up and after they install it. So they're, definitely looking at $2,500, maybe $3,000 just to do this, and that's probably being conservative. But that was their cost from the manufacturer, was $1,200. Now, was that better quality? Probably. I don't know, but I can't imagine that it's twice the life of what this has. All of these have generally speaking, a 10 to 15 year life is what they're rated for. Obviously, people out there are squeezing a lot more life out of it, 20 years. But in the end, these are not they're not unlike any other appliance. They're the same where, you get a new fridge at most every 20 years, or at the very least every 20 years. Same thing here. So I can't imagine that this is going to die in 5 years. In fact, they had the same warranty. So that is, I did register this product with the manufacturer, but I can't imagine that his manufacturer was so much better that it was worth double the cost. That's why I ended up going with this system. Now, the ones that they had were locally produced, so that could have been part of it, that, maybe this is made in China or something. I have no idea where it's made, and it's shipped over, and that's why it's cheaper. Maybe they're using a lower quality resin bead. That was one of the potentials. The head and clack mixer both look very similar actually to what the local company uses. If you look at these online and compare them, they almost all look the exact same, because it's just a general fiber tank or whatever those are called. So they all look the same. So I'm half convinced they're all even the same product. But at the end of the day, if you're going to hire a plumber, the only thing I would be hiring them to do would be something like this drain where, ideally the drain would go through the floor and come over here to the sump pump. That's how a new house would be built. So that's what I would be hiring. So that way you don't have to jack up the concrete or something like that. But as far as actually installing it, purchasing it, I would do that all on your own through Amazon or through their website.